Our focus today is very much on WhatWorks export. And I'd like to start by extending our thanks to Global Affairs Canada for sponsoring our session today. I'm extremely pleased to have Mike Dodd joining us here today to say a few words to kick off the session. And just to introduce Mike to you, he has worked at Global Affairs Canada since 2010, handling a range of commercial and political affairs at headquarters and serving in multiple assignments abroad. He's presently the Trade Commissioner responsible for creative technology at the Pacific Regional Office of Global Affairs Canada in Vancouver. Welcome, Mike, and over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Jill. It's really my pleasure to join this session today and to have this chance to introduce the Trade Commissioner Service, or TCS, and also to hear from the great panelists today. So my name is Mike Dodd, and I'm a Trade Commissioner based in Vancouver. I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm speaking today from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. Next slide, please. So what is the Trade Commissioner Service? Well, we're part of the federal government under Global Affairs Canada, and we are a service for Canadian companies, especially SMEs, to help them succeed at business abroad. TCS services are offered free of charge to companies who have meaningful economic ties to Canada, have a capacity for and commitment to internationalize, and have good potential to add value to the Canadian economy. We have an on-the-ground network of more than 1,000 trade commissioners in over 160 locations, and we use that unparalleled network in Canada's embassies, consulates, and trade offices to help clients who want to do business there. Next slide, please. So our regional office in Vancouver is the best way to connect with our global network. And once a client is ready to go internationally, we can connect them with one of our offices abroad. We also have a range of funding programs for companies, associations, and communities. And lastly, we have special programs to connect clients to mentors, help them dig deeper into specific country markets, and enhance Canada's presence with trade shows and missions. Next slide, please. What exactly do trade commissioners do to help companies? Well, we provide market intelligence and practical business advice specific to your countries of interest. We help open the door to new business opportunities globally. For instance, business-to-business matchmaking and pavilions at trade shows. We can also provide qualified business contacts, for instance, local industry associations and chambers of commerce, IP professionals, lawyers who specialize in those countries. And we can assist in resolving complex business problems in foreign markets, such as customs issues, IP protection, and taxation. I also wanted to mention that as part of Canada's trade diversification strategy, we're also working to diversify who trades through tailored services for SMEs that identify with inclusive trade groups, including women, Indigenous peoples, visible minorities, youth, and members of LGBTQ2 communities. Our goal is to make our services more accessible and inclusive. Next slide, please. So that's the TCS in a nutshell. If you have any questions, whether you're yet to take the plunge into exporting or you're a seasoned pro looking for a little more help, please don't hesitate to contact me directly. And even if we can't help right now, we'll be sure to find someone who can. So thanks again. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from today's panelists. Back to you, Jill.
I have to say that Global Affairs really is a fantastic partner, and I would really encourage those on the call to reach out with Mike or someone in his team, because there's definitely opportunities for them to accelerate your success. In today's session, we have three impressive BC leaders who have made their mark on the world stage. And in our panel discussion, in a moment, we will hear from each of them about their scale-up journeys, how exporting helped to boost their scale-up success, what markets they found success in and why, and also have them help us see from their perspective what might be the greatest opportunities for BC tech companies to expand their horizons. And lastly, I'll make sure they give you some advice on what they think you can do immediately after this session to focus and accelerate your exporting journey. Can you share how exporting was key to your scale-up journey?
Jill, thanks a lot. It's great to be in the panel discussion with our peers here, and I see a good number of audience, a good number of people from Motion Metrics are here. Great to see our colleagues. So yes, for Motion Metrics, export has been key. So essentially, in the early years, as I was starting the company, bootstrapping, I noticed the opportunities for us in BC was quite limited. In Canada was better, but still not huge. But then you have the whole world. And I mean, if you expand that vision, then in the next few decades, we see humanity going to the space. That's another way of exporting. So it has been key to our success that we have had years with more than 95% of our revenue coming from export. And so it has been a journey. From the early years, we were getting calls from, for example, Chile and Spanish people asking, we are very interested in your product. How can we get our hand on it? To the fact that our very first vision system was sold to a diamond mine in Botswana. That was in 2003. That's really, I would say that was our first commercial revenue. Even though Canadian Mines Syncrude, they actually helped us in the early stage with some funding to do a feasibility study and all that. So in short, exporting has been very key to the success of Motion Metrics over years. And we continue to see that as a huge opportunity going forward now that we call it that Motion Metrics 2.0 with the new owner, the Weir Group. Thanks, Jill.
That's excellent. So that's an example of export first. Really, it sounds like your first commercial customer was from Botswana, not from BC. Keith, let's turn to you and hear a little more about how exporting was key to Galvanize's scale-up journey.
Sure. Well, I joined Galvanize back in 2012. And actually at the time, the company was known as ACL. And the core product then was ACL Analytics, which actually at the time was already being used by companies, more than 14,000 companies in over 130 countries. So even when I joined the company, it was already global. And it was really pulled by the market in terms of that analytics technology was used by auditors worldwide to help query data. But what we did in the intervening years is we actually realized that that market was stagnating to some extent, and that we needed to explore new capabilities. And just as I joined the company, we had acquired a cloud-based technology called workpapers.com. And that subsequently became Hybon, which was a cloud-based GRC solution, governance, risk, and compliance. And so the company needed to, first of all, we had to transform the business model because analytics was sold on a perpetual license. And so we had to take that to a subscription license. And what was interesting is we were in direct markets in places like EMEA and APJ. And I'll talk a little bit later on about why we were in those specific markets direct. But in terms of the rest of the world, we were using resellers. So we had a reseller channel market that helped us to penetrate different regions where we didn't have the local capabilities. And when we went through that business model transformation, we had to take the channel partners along on that journey with us. And it was really interesting to assess partnerships and what are the right kind of partners for us in the different markets that we were going into to determine were they really aligned with what we were doing? Were they able to change with us as a software company? Were they able to go on that journey? And were they a growth business versus a lifestyle business? So we learned a lot of lessons along the way around what are the right kinds of partners, what are the right markets to go direct, and really how much to invest to be successful versus putting your toe in the water. And so a lot of lessons over the past 10 years as a software company, a lot of lessons about what platforms we built on top of. One of the interesting stories is Canada was actually somewhat of a foreign market to us because we built our technology on Amazon Web Services. And in the early days, Amazon did not have a data center in Canada. And so for us to set up and support our Canadian customers, we actually had to create a bit of a unicorn solution. And that actually served as a bit of headwinds for us as a business. And so thinking about how we were building on the right kinds of platforms and leveraging where the big players were successful and then going along with them was really key as well. So tons of lessons along the way. There's more that I can share, but yeah, absolutely. Exporting was critical to the growth of Galvanize. Maybe one last point I'll add, and then I'll give it back to you, Jill, is just when you have a global business, you're going to have ups and downs in revenue in different regions over the years. And just like a diversified investment portfolio, having a diversified set of markets can help you so that when one is up, maybe one is down, that helps smooth out your growth. So that's something to be mindful of as well. So back to you.
Thank you. Really rich input there, both from the, exporting isn't one size fits all, right? There can be a direct model, there can be a partnership model, there can be a through channel partners model, and thinking about what's right for you and your business and the markets is key. And I like that observation about the tools that you use and the platforms that you build on are key too. So Mark, I know there's going to be a lot that resonates there with you, but tell us again about LMI's journey and what you found was critically important.
Yes, so LMI traces its roots back to before I was born even, but to BC and to the wood industry. And so, LMI traces its roots to basically building machine vision systems for scanning logs and timber and processing right here at home. And obviously, as LMI grew, they grew with sort of a combination of global expansion. So of course, BC led to the rest of Canada, led to the US, led to Scandinavia, and, looking at wood processing in those areas. But it also led to exploring, machine vision through the measurement of shape in other manufacturing markets, whether it was automotive or transportation or rubber and tire production. And essentially then the world opened up in terms of possibilities. And so through to about 2010, I joined LMI in 2006. There was this strong vertical niche market focus where LMI was really looking at tailored solutions to these industries. And then in 2010, LMI went through a bit of a transformation. We shifted from this vertical market strategy to a horizontal strategy where we created a product platform that could be configured and used for scanning, measurement, inspection, automation, and basically any industry by anyone. So this was at a point in time when software was evolving, ease of use was big, right? I mean, you think back to the first iPhone and how you didn't need a user's manual to use an iPhone. You just hit the screen and punched buttons and you worked out how it worked. And we were sort of mirroring that in our products for the industrial segment to say, hey, anyone can be a machine vision expert. You don't need to have a computer science degree. Just drag and drop some blocks and create some tools. And now whatever it is that you're trying to measure or inspect, you can do it through our software. And that was pivotal because it allowed us to rapidly expand our commercial organization from simply, vertical market experts that knew how a sawmill worked in all of the different processes to go out to, system integrators, to go out to machine vision distributors. And basically over the period of the last 10 years, we've built out our network now where we have 65 distributors in 45 countries around the world. But really the second portion of that is that those distributors, those system integrators allowed us to better understand the potential for our product, where the markets were, where they were having success. So we could then piggyback off that in terms of our direct expansion. And now sort of unsurprisingly, because we're focused on manufacturing, our biggest end market is China because it's the world's largest place for manufacturing. And so over the last 5 years, our presence as China has shifted from one person in one office to 3 offices with 85 staff there. And that's strictly from a commercial perspective. We have salespeople, we have application engineering, we have vision engineering, people that are there to sort of, solve the problems of our customers and support our solution. So it's really sort of interesting to look at that trajectory in terms of how many opportunities you have once you start going to the global market.
That's fascinating, Mark. So for you, it isn't just in different markets you take different approaches, but you're actually improving and accelerating your product development by engaging with these different markets and finding out new lessons and new opportunities.
Right. And I don't want to say we're constantly stumbling upon new markets, but because, you can end up at a trade show and someone can walk up to you with a part and say, hey, here's this widget and I want to see and inspect this feature on it. And it's for an application or a market that you have no previous awareness of. And then suddenly it balloons into something much bigger once you understand the potential for that market. So we're constantly we have our commercial organization closely tied to our product managers, closely tied to sort of our strategy team in terms of understanding where we take resources, where we focus them, and how we use that to manage our growth.
That's fantastic. So definitely, I mean, this is why I love customers. Customers have all the wisdom in the world. So as much direct contact with as many customers as you can have, and you'll go faster. Definitely. So let's go a bit deeper with each of you and think about a bit more of the detail of specific markets. So tell us a bit about one or two of your specific markets where you had real success and why they were a focus for you. Keith, I'd love to start with you on this one.
Yeah, at Galvanize, we were quite fortunate that we were successful in many countries around the world. We were quite strong in South America. Latin America was really strong for us, APJ, Europe. But so for us, it was really always a decision by where are we going to be direct in that market? Where were we going to build teams and capabilities? And where were we going to use a reseller model? So we really didn't differentiate to say that we're not going to be in a particular location. There were a few countries, obviously, because we were in the governance, risk, and compliance space. There's just certain parts of the world where just we didn't do business. We just felt like it wasn't worth the risk, the challenges to do business in certain locations. But for the most part, we focused in on EMEA and APJ as our direct business. And we chose those markets for a number of reasons. In our analysis, we felt like those were markets that were large enough. So in terms of the ARR, which is revenue for the business, we felt like we could make it work there and make it successful. We also felt like having a direct team in the location was necessary in order to have the local knowledge to be able to create a feedback loop back to Vancouver to make sure that we really understood what was required to be successful. We just couldn't have that go through layers in those particular markets. There was enough rules and regulations. You think about things like GDPR, for example, in Europe. There's just that much more challenge there. We also felt like we needed to have leadership that was high integrity, capable, and really understood the balance between having local control versus centralized standards. And I think this is one of the things as companies build their businesses out into specific markets is to really think about, what are you going to just give the local team full ownership and control over, and what are you going to actually want to make sure that you have centralized standards to ensure that you're doing things in a consistent way that are repeatable and you can scale. Because today we're talking about scaling up, right? And you can't scale up if everybody is doing everything differently. And so having leadership in the region that was able to both, be independent, be driven, be, creating a market, but also communicates well and connects back with our central executive team to be able to make sure that we are building a scalable business in those locations. That was key to, picking particular direct markets where we felt like we could create that kind of a setup.
That's really interesting. Mark, I think there's some resonances there with what you were talking about. But Shahram, I'm going to go to you next because I'm really curious about your story and this sort of exporting first. And what were the specific markets that you went to, and why did you go to those? Tell us about your successes.
Sure, Jill. So just imagine me more than 2 decades ago, just starting the company, as I said, bootstrap. So I should have mentioned we do from beginning, essentially my background is electrical engineering. So I'm more of a academic technical person, slowly converted to a businessman and entrepreneur. And so rugged machine vision and sensor-based solutions for tough mining challenges. Even though I was starting with the construction industry, but opportunity was in mining. I saw that they are willing to spend a lot of money. The super cycle was starting. So it was really good being in Canada because we got opportunities to test, as I said earlier, get some initial funding. A lot of government of Canada funding was happening. And then we started seeing where are the jurisdictions that they take chance with a very early, startup, non-proven technology, because the pain we were addressing was very important. The missing tools detection system, which was the second technology, by the way. So the first one was payload monitoring for mining shovels, which was a result of my PhD, and that has had good traction over the years. But really, we pivoted to machine vision, back then 2D, and addressing a nasty problem which the mines were suffering. A tooth is, if this goes missing from a shovel, in a mining shovel, it can end up on the truck and the crusher and cause safety concerns. People have been injured, lost their lives, and there was still no solution. So the problem came to our attention from a Canadian mine. So, and the initial funding was there. But then, as I said earlier, the first sale was to Africa. And then there was a big group of mining in the US, and they formed a mine technology group. So they visited us because we were the only ones working on this problem using machine vision. And they came to the lab. Back then, we were only a few people in the company. I remember I was very nervous, actually, when he was visiting, right? This is Mark Bartlett visiting. And I remember we said, okay, usually we get our coffee from Tim Hortons. Let's get nice, fancy coffee from Starbucks for the visitor. Just imagine, this is like 20-something years ago. I was so nervous as I was explaining, I ended up drinking his coffee instead of my own. It's like, I was like, and then I noticed I pushed it there. But what I want to say is that they took a chance. They liked what we were doing. They said, we are going to buy the first system. Within a week, they sent the first check to us to initiate the first project for one of their cable shovels, which we had done some work on a hydraulic shovel, but cable shovel was harder. But before we know it, within 6 months to a year, we were flooded with orders from 8 mines which they owned, primarily in the USA, some in South America, one in Indonesia, and purchase orders were coming. And so that's, I would say in the US, they were taking a lot more chances, and that helped us to get that going. Really, we had a few years of revenue going crazy and pretty much all export. Chile and Africa also, we had a lot of opportunities. So I would divide the mines, our target customers, some of them easier markets and some harder. Like I would consider Australia, Brazil, Russia, big mining jurisdictions, harder, and Canada is somewhere in between. So over the years, we have always had, good sales to Canada, but really we started seeing where the opportunities are. And I just wanna, just two things to mention is that in the beginning, we were doing our best to find any ways to sell to those jurisdictions. Export Development Canada, EDC, was very helpful. I think organizations like you guys, DC Tech, that you connect us, especially locally, I got a lot of very good early advice because of this. The trade associations in the industry, in our case, MSTA Canada, Mining Suppliers Trade Association, amazing organization. And I see Brian Roberts here in the audience. So from Wavefront, thanks a lot, Brian. We went to what do you call a business mission in Australia and in South America, a lot of opportunities from there. EDC, absolutely amazing. And Canada Trade Commissioner Service, TCS, excellent. We go to events. Being a Canadian supplier, you are well received around the world. And really TCS, and unbelievable. Every trade show we go, there's some high-level people from TCS is like, oh, we have this event happening. Can we connect you to this mine and all that? Really, so I second what was being said by Mike Todd earlier as the sponsor of the event. So really good experience. And I'll talk next time later how we went from startup to scale up and now under, as part of a public company. Thanks, Joe.
Oh, that's really an interesting. Well, I'm glad that we could be of help. I'm sure Mike's delighted with your kind words. So thank you. What I found fascinating in your story there, though, is that your customers actually sought you out, right, at a very early stage. But so having good customers who are prepared to take risks is key for technology companies to thrive and for technology to sort of strengthen traditional industries. You've got to have the right customers with the right attitudes. So, but that's a fascinating angle on an exporting success story. So let's go to Mark. Tell us about your experience in specific markets.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to talk, I think probably now one of our biggest markets and the best example of this is the consumer electronics space, particularly when we think about cell phone manufacturing. And this has been a target market of LMI since, 2010, 2012, sometime around there. But it really took us about 5 years to get into the market to understand what it needed. And a lot of it came down to just simply the very, very high demands for this market. I mean, on the one hand, there's absolutely huge potential, right? 1.5 billion cell phones sold every year means 4 million per day, which means 200 per second are being manufactured. So you can think of this in the context of if you're trying to build machine vision systems and you're trying to inspect hundreds or thousands of different components of cell phones, at that volume, you're talking about tens of thousands of systems being required globally for the manufacturing of them. So the market potential is absolutely huge, and again, it's largely focused in China right now. So we went after this with a very, very sort of targeted approach to understand where we were from a technology perspective. Again, I talked in the last question about customers, the importance of customers. What did they need? What did they want? But the combination of really going after those customers combined with the rapid technology cycle in that industry. I mean, new phones come out every 6 months, right? So you have a challenge on the one hand where the companies are moving so fast that if they want something, they want it now. And if you don't have it now, well, too bad, they'll move on to the next person, basically. But it also gives you an opportunity that they're going to come back to you in 6 months and say, okay, next phone, now what do you have? Now this is our new problem, right? And we've, as a technology company, we're always innovating. We're always trying to find new ways to solve problems, which has allowed us to get ahead of the competition in many ways and build that expertise. I mean, I think it's over that period where we've been focused on this industry, you have to think that the products themselves have changed as well. I mean, you went from flimsy plastic housings held together with screws to, lots of aluminum and now to glass and curved glass and glue and waterproof and, all of these different features of cell phones has come with huge manufacturing expertise to manufacture in these volumes at those precision levels. So it's been a really exciting journey to tackle the technology challenges from what our customers are trying to do from a design perspective and putting out the next generation product, and leave your impact on that in terms of making it efficient, improving the yields, reducing waste, and ultimately producing a higher quality product through your systems, through your services.
It's really interesting, Mark. And so there's a common theme that's coming across for me, at least, which is it's absolutely essential to be tackling big enough markets. It's when you tackle those big enough markets that you're really going to realize the potential of your technology.
And I think it ultimately comes back to that ambition of scale, right? If you want to produce $100 million in revenue or $1 billion in revenue, what markets are going to support that ultimately, and how does it fit into that? So yeah, if you want to grow, you have to go after markets that are going to support you, and you have to know where those markets are and how to enter them.
Well, let's stay with you, Mark, for this next question, because what do you think are the biggest opportunities, the biggest market opportunities, or the biggest markets that you think BC tech companies could focus on? Where do you see opportunity?
I think it's very different depending on what sector you are in, but we're at a very interesting time in the world where so much is changing as a result of the pandemic. And I think back to when the pandemic started and people started talking about supply chain disruptions and no one could buy toilet paper, and then there weren't masks available in Canada, and then Canada couldn't manufacture vaccines and they couldn't manufacture masks, and a year later no one could buy any semiconductor chips and car manufacturers were shutting down. And it's a great example of how some external event that was largely unpredicted, unexpected, has led to radical changes in terms of the way companies interact with each other, with the way that governments interact with supply chains, and being involved in corporate planning. And so, we're seeing a huge opportunity as a result of the pandemic where manufacturing is moving to locations where it wasn't previously. I mean, again, you look at the semiconductor crisis, right? It spawned this huge, challenge to the point where you have President Biden talking about spending $50 billion on semiconductor manufacturing for the US because they don't want to be dependent on foreign countries for their semiconductor supply. You have Korea turn around and spend 9 times that on semiconductor supply, right? And now you're seeing companies open up semiconductor plants, not just in the US, but throughout Europe and Germany, places like that. Areas that traditionally had nothing to do with semiconductor production are now investing in this because they see it as absolutely core to their futures. And it's happened at the other end of the technology scale as well, where, Vidicor and Burnaby's been a great example of manufacturing masks in BC. I know they just donated 100,000 masks to the BCTF, which I think was a fantastic move. And again, they're in a position now where they can supply that critical piece of protective equipment to the workers, to the employees who need them, And before, Canada was entirely dependent on foreign countries for supply of something that's turned out to be so critical in our current environment. So as technologies evolve, obviously it creates opportunities, but also as external events come, as things like the pandemic, they've really shaken up the world works, and it creates new opportunities that you have to be agile and adapt to. So as long as I think, again, you keep talking to customers, you keep understanding what it is that they want, and you find creative solutions to that, there's an endless possibilities of ways to grow your business.
Really appreciate that. Thank you. Keith, let's go to you. What do you see as the biggest opportunities for BC companies, either markets or
well, there's never been a better time to be a BC business. I think there's so much success happening here, and the world looks at. I think it might have been Sharon was saying that the world looks at Canadian businesses. You get already sort of a pass, or we're more welcome because there's an expectation of quality and an expectation of integrity, which I think is super important for Canadian businesses. And this really comes down to headwinds and tailwinds. And it kind of builds on what Mark was saying. If there is something happening in a market which really lends itself well to what your business is about, it's finding those places where there's a pull, where there's some nice tailwinds which are supporting what you do. For the most part, though, I would say, like, if you haven't exhausted your analysis of the US market, that you should really start there before you start going really widely international, unless there's some secret sauce to your solution, product, or technology in another country in the world. Because every country comes with a level of complexity and cognitive load for you and your team. And the US is essentially short flight away, generally speaks the same language, understands the same business models. So, and California and New York, these places are country-sized markets. And so if you're not exhausting what you can achieve in those markets first, I think companies that are small and immediately jump to far distant countries, you could do that if that makes sense. And this is where a group like Global Affairs comes in and can really help you analyze to make sure that you're making those right decisions. But if you're not, you could drive across the border and the Washington market is huge. So it's just thinking about the US first would be my top take there.
That's excellent advice. Thank you. And Sharam, I'm going to come to you in a moment for the last word on this moderated question, but I just want to remind the audience to have your questions ready. So please raise them in the chat, and we'll come to those in just a moment. But Sharam, what do you see as the biggest opportunities for BC tech companies in the export space?
Yes, Jill. First of all, 100% I agree with Mark on the impact of pandemic and how it has kind of reshaped how things are happening. Over the last, I would say, 8 years, we had 3 major interests from US companies to buy Motion Metrics, plus some additional ones, strategic or private equity. The pandemic gave us an opportunity to really expand our resources, and we ended up to be acquired during, the deal closed in the middle of the pandemic. It was December 1st of last year. And it really helped us, honestly, the amount of due diligence and so forth, it would have been impossible to do it if I was doing the level of travel I was doing pre-pandemic. So it really helped us reconfigure and revisit our products and revisit opportunities and expanding. So what I mean by that is that we never raised any money, right? Motion Metrics, the amount we have raised over the years is $0, right? So about a year ago, I decided we need expanded resources. Company was crossing 100 people. We had opened offices around the world. And so we went plan A and plan B, and plan A was to be acquired. So how did it impact us? In the beginning, we were selling directly to the markets. Then via help from EDC and other organizations, we started finding representatives rather than distributors, which Mark talked about how LMI has been horizontal. MMI, Motion Metrics International, we have been vertical, very focused on tough mining challenges, and we stayed with that focus, right? So we decided rather than distributors, we needed to have representative agents that we could they could understand our products, right? So we started with that model, succeeded very well, for example, in Chile for a good number of years. Then it came to the time that we said, like, we got to open our offices. This is 6 or 7 years ago. We started with Motion Metrics LATAM in Chile, Motion Metrics Africa, Australia, Brazil, and Russia. Those 5 offices. And that was taking a lot of effort, but it was paying off. Like, because we could train our people, they knew what's happening. We are selling directly. We are like Tesla model, right? We are talking directly to the end user and we are dealing with them. Then after the acquisition by We Are Esco, I mean, the company is like a giant, 11,000 people, right? Now we have our model change, the scale up. So rather than opening our offices, we are in 65 mines. They have people everywhere who are able to sell, to support. So a lot of training, you know, the dynamics has changed, but still we see export as huge part of our business. I would say will continue to be more than 90% of the revenue coming from that. So that's kind of journey, but essentially now, rather than all these regions I talked earlier, we feel like we have this major, with We Are group, we have this major sales force and support group around the globe. And now we're thinking, okay, how do we scale? I'm talking about center of excellence, potentially what I refer to mega factory. So we want to establish something that we design, develop, manufacture state-of-the-art rugged machine vision systems here in Greater Vancouver and ship it worldwide and all that. So excited about that, but I 100% agree that dynamics have changed. Unfortunately, we also adapted to that as we saw this happening. Thanks, Joe.
That's really an interesting insight there. Well, listen, I've started to get some good questions in the chat, so I'm going to field those out to you, and I'm going to perhaps ask one of you to take them. The first one, Mark, I think is for you. Brian's asking a really interesting question, which is, how do you balance market size and potential, and if you're successful in that, as you were describing for the consumer electronics space, versus the actual difficulties of that market? Now, you've made a success of exporting to China, but it's not a straightforward market. So tell us about that.
Unmute.
Yeah, sorry about the mute. It's definitely a challenge, and as I alluded to in my answer about or talking about the consumer electronics space, we weren't immediately successful, and one of the factors was we simply weren't large enough to be considered for these projects. Right? When you win a project, you're talking about installing sensors and bringing up production lines at multiple sites around the country, and many different lines even per building, right? To the point where if you don't have 35 people, you can't have one person at each production line, and therefore they're not even going to consider you for the job, right? And so to a certain point, with that, market size really comes down to, are you ready to take it on? But there's another aspect to this, which is, with market difficulty, as the sort of the question alludes to, that there's other rewards in certain cases, right? I mean, I'm going to use Korea as an example here. Korea has very specific, unique regulations from an electronics perspective, right? Where other countries might recognize, IEC standards or even the American standards. There's the KCC safety protocols in Korea, which means you need to go through a whole separate level of certification just to sell your products into Korea. And so that's a barrier, but once you've passed that barrier, it's also a barrier to your competitors. And so anytime that you're facing these sort of difficult solutions, if you believe you have the resources, the capability, the understanding to overcome that barrier, it puts you in a better position. And the stronger your position is, the better you are protected, right? Now, the last thing that I want to face as a CEO is in a position where our products become a commodity and they're sold based on price on the global market, and margins evaporate, and now suddenly we're in a very tight operational excellence type model, right? It's difficult to run a technology company in a commodity market. It's sort of the thing you want to avoid. So how can you use technology? How can you use your sales organization? How can you use your features to create some sort of a barrier that you can use to your advantage? And you just really, again, you have to understand your customers. You have to understand what they need. And then you have to say, am I willing to do that do I have the resources? Do we have the capabilities? And is this where we want to prioritize ultimately to tackle that on? So yeah, when you're ready for that market, I think it'll be clear that you have confidence you can go after it and take it on.
That's great. Thank you. And I love that. Yeah, commodities is tough, right? Like we really want to avoid that when we're selling high margin products with high quality, high regulations. That's the secret sauce for tech. Listen, Keith, I want to come to you with a question, which Nestor is asking, which is, shouldn't a company prioritize certain geographies that have good intellectual property laws versus road companies? Do you have experience from Galvanize on that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's a great question. I think you have to think about what are the second order consequences of doing business in that particular market. Are you going to benefit now, but then pay a price down the road based on the choices that you make? In any market that you choose to work in, you know, the juice has to be worth the squeeze. You have to be able to support, you know, not just sell, but sell, support, and service whatever you're providing in there. And you have to be able to trust that the people that you're employing and the customers that you're dealing with are going to, you know, act in the best interest of your organization and act with integrity. And I'll just say it, there are places in the world today where that is not the case. I'm not going to name any of them, but I'm just going to say, be very thoughtful about where you do business, because in certain parts of the world, it just isn't worth your time. And again, like I go back to what I said earlier, the United States is huge. The United States is a massive market. And if you haven't exhausted your business opportunity there and you're off in far-flung places of the world, I would question your strategy.
Thanks, Keith. A great question here from Ronak from the Ministry of Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation. And this is one for me. So what key areas would you like to see more collaboration and leadership from the BC government in? Well, it's a really simple answer to that question. We've got to help more BC tech startups grow into scale-ups. So we've got fantastic potential. We've got some amazing unicorns on the call today. We know that BC tech companies can be successful globally, and yet today only 2% of BC's tech companies have 100 or more employees. So the problem in BC is that, I love it, thanks Keith, but the problem in BC is that we don't help our startups to become scale-ups, and so that's why BC Tech is advocating for the Scale Up BC platform. We're asking for the province to invest 10 million over 4 years, for the federal government to invest 31 million over 4 years, and then we can help 800 companies to scale up. So that's the most important area for government to play, because you can hear the potential of these astonishing tech companies on the call. My job is to help more than those who are succeeding today. I want to see more than 2% of our companies succeed. I want to see 98% of our companies succeed. So now Hedy has another great question. And Shahram, I'd like to come to you on this one. So what advice do you give to tech companies about evaluating your export readiness? So what thought process did you go through in thinking, am I ready to export? What kind of things do I need to think about? What thought process do you go through when you're going into a new market?
The answer is easy. Export is fun, it's profitable, and you have much bigger opportunities. So honestly, I didn't even think too much about it. I mean, the inquiries are coming, right? We could see they're contacting us. We have funding. Listen, we have a mine in Africa. They were interested in a modified version of our products. They actually invested some money to initiate that project, which ended up becoming part of our product. So it is essentially you're expanding the horizons. So my answer to that question is fairly straightforward. We were seeing where are the low-hanging fruits, right? And once you're starting exporting, well, for a company like Motion Metrics, where we have been very focused on vertically, maybe you're working on a big opportunity somewhere, and then suddenly another pot boils, and then they're like, oh, we have funding and we want to buy 20 systems. We're like, okay, guys, we have to, wrap our head around. I see two of the startups I've invested, their founders are here. Amir Ahani from TechPOS. So he has been trying to sell his software in Canada, is looking to expand to the US. And I see Masood from PH7 Technologies. They are mining sustainability company, startup. Hopefully all of these will be scale up and we're gonna hire tons of people. They're again looking into how to bring sustainability into the mining process by using solvo metallurgy. And they're talking to me and I'm suggesting, hey, we have this big mine, platinum mine in Africa, maybe it can be a very good customer. So we connecting them. These guys are, a few years startup, opportunity comes, there's money. I don't think there's much to think about. I mean, my answer is simple. I'm a simple guy. Thanks.
Just do it. You're Nike. Okay. Keith, you were saying in the chat that you really want to answer that question. So let me hand the mic over to you.
Well, it's such an awesome question about like what can the government in BC do to support local businesses. I think there's so much. I mean, one of the things that it always depends on what the government's doing, but there's that first reference customer that a business gets is so vital to be able to build marketing stories and capabilities on. This is something where the local, the government, both of BC and Canada, working together with startups to help them get that first reference customer, whether it's in a new market, it's here in BC, or buying the software or the technology or the solution themselves, to be able to be that prime to the pump to be able to help companies be successful. Obviously, any more grants. I mean, the list goes on: grants and financial support, tax support. There are places in the world today which are making it very competitive to put your software engineering team, as an example. So are we being competitive on a world stage? To Mark's point earlier about how the pandemic has changed everything, you can work remotely anywhere today. So software companies and technologies can pick employees anywhere in the world very easily, and all the technology like what we're talking on today makes that simple. So what are we doing in BC to make it competitive to have the jobs here versus in other places? That's something where the government can really support. I could go on for hours about this, but there's certainly things that the government can do in BC to make this a friendly environment for startups.
That's helpful. Thank you, Keith. And Eric, I'll ask you to just drop in the chat BC Tech's recent economic research report that really focuses on the importance of making sure that we're growing the economy of today, because the economy today is 80% of the jobs, 75% of the GDP, 50% of the exports are services, not goods, like high margin services businesses. We were talking earlier about that. So how can we make sure that BC's realizing its potential and really competing well on the global stage? That's the path to prosperity and sustainability for all of us. Now, listen, this has been a fantastic session, but I'm insisting that you're going to answer my final question before we close, because we got so many startups on the call and so many people who would really love to accelerate their export journey. So I'm going to ask you for one piece of advice. So one piece of advice with what you would ask and urge people to do after this call so they can be more effective tomorrow. Mark, can we start with you?
Sure. If there's one thing I preach to my team, it's about focus. It's about understanding what you're trying to do and have intentionality behind it, such that you're not trying to do everything at the same time. I think, you can look at so many of the different answers that have been provided through the session today, and a lot of it comes down to that focus. Obviously Keith's been a huge advocate for start with the US, start with Washington State, it's right there. And I think that's really key. When you're talking about export, it's very easy to get excited about, look, there's thousands of companies in hundreds of different countries that could all be our customer. Let's go after all of them. And I think those approaches are rarely successful because you become too diluted. You don't really understand what you're doing. You try to please everyone. You don't satisfy anyone, and you burn everyone out through that process. So I think having a clear understanding of where you're trying to go, what you're going to be successful doing, and really be able to envision that success is critical, right? I mean, even the question I think about how do you know when you're ready to export is a great one, because you have to understand that. And yeah, there's great resources through there, whether it's through the trade commissioners, Export Canada, even BC has resources as well. Other companies out there, don't take that leap until you're sure. But obviously there's big opportunities out there. Just stay focused on what it is that you're trying to do. Really, really, really stay focused on it. Keep your team focused on it. And I think that focus is many times what drives success.
Focus, focus, focus. Got it. Thank you. Sharam, what's your one piece of advice?
Take a chance with the export. So I'm gonna a little bit different than what Mark suggested. First of all, 100% agree with Mark. Focus has been a key driver of our success, but I don't want to repeat Mark. I want to make it something different. So listen, 1992, just imagine me, 25 years old, immigrating from Iran to Canada. What did I do? I took a chance. Yes, there was different places I could go, different opportunities. I decided Vancouver, Canada is gonna be my home for at least 4 years of graduate studies here, right? And then I loved it so much that I didn't leave. I'm still, listen, my office is still, I have an office in UBC because I love this place, right? So, and exporting is similar to that. Do you wanna limit your market to BC, to Canada, or you want to take a chance? Again, you have to, see where the opportunity is, where the low-hanging fruits are, where the bigger market exists, and do it. Thanks.
Take a chance. Love it. And Keith, last word to you.
No one builds an export business alone. Reach out for help. Reach out to BC Tech, to Global Affairs, to the BC government. Reach out to partners in the markets that you're looking to do business. There's no global business that's ever been built on sheer force of will. It's built in collaboration with those that are looking to help you and have your best interests in mind. So that would be my top advice is go out there and look for those organizations that can help you.
Well, that's inspiring. So thank you so much. It's been an incredible conversation. Thanks to each of our speakers for coming and sharing your insights and your stories. It's been really galvanizing, pun intended. And I'd also like to thank Global Affairs Canada for your partnership on today's event.